This week on UPFront, more than 6,000 delegates, including President John Dramani Mahama and other African heads of states and government, are converging in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire for the 2025 annual meetings of the African Development Bank. The meeting this year is focusing on making Africa's capital work better for Africa's development and bringing to the fore questions on how Africa can unlock more capital to boost trade and development. Also attending this crucial summit is Ekow Spio-Garabrah, former Minister for Trade and Industry. We sit down with him in a conversation on Ghana's economic rebound, national development, and Africa's prosperity. Honorable Spio-Garbrah, thank you for spending some time with us here on JoyNews. We are far away from home, as some would say, but of course distance will certainly not be a barrier to the conversations in terms of national discourse. This is the annual meetings of the African Development Bank, but we're looking at a broad-based perspective of how African economies have fared over the years. And it's perhaps the reason why the foremost financial institution of Africa has been leading that charge. But let's start off from home, because charity should begin from home. What's your own impression about, the last few days of what your party calls the reset agenda in bringing back and restoring hope in the Ghanaian economy?
Well, maybe last few days must be more like the last 120 or 130 days, because as you may recall, President Mahama clocked, I think, 120 days a few days to weeks ago. And at that time, there was an attempt to do an assessment by a number of interest groups, whether they are, research companies. I think the Daily Graphic itself had a certain percentage on its front page of 70 plus in terms of achievement. Other social and civil society groups came up with their own numbers. So I think that was a point where people wanted to evaluate the performance of a new government based on the fact that President Mahama himself, to the best of my knowledge, since our independence, he must have been the first president to set a specific range of benchmarks for himself within the first 120 days. Some will say he set his own questions and then he had to pass the examination. But the exam questions...
Do you feel he's answering the questions himself?
Of course, he has answered the questions. I mean, the questions he asked of himself were quite demanding. I'll do so much, so, first of all, half the heads of government from the last government, 60 ministers only, which I think he has not even achieved yet in terms of numbers. Get them all, vetted and approved within a certain number of weeks. Then, of course, now appointing chief executives of many state-owned organizations, some chairmen and some boards of many companies, just to get the economy running. And while doing all of that, then you see very impressive numbers with regards to the CD-dollar exchange rate, which, determines a lot of the functionalities of the economy as a whole. So I think he's been running many balls in the air, as a juggler would do, and doing them quite competently.
What do you say to people who share the view that he's just ticking the boxes?
No, but whose boxes is he ticking? I'm saying that he set a very high benchmark for himself in terms of the things that he had to do. He had to kind of bring the initial programs of the 24-hour economy alive. He had to go through the process of, nominating ministers and deputies and getting them sworn in. He had to, also initiate actions with the educational reform program, the national economy conference that has been held. So these were a long list of things that he set to himself as benchmarks. And I'm saying, according to most neutral observers, including the Daily Graphic, which is not my paper, which is not even an NDC paper necessarily, he scored over 70%. Others have scored him over 75 and 40, depending on how you assess it. I know his opponents or NDC opponents have tended to rank him below 50%. That's not unusual. All in all, I think most people agree that he's done better than expected and is doing well and can be encouraged. And I think for people who feel it in their pockets, it's the first time in a long time, at least in my generation, I'm 70 plus years old, that prices are coming down. I mean, fuel prices are coming down. Spare parts prices are coming down, and even traders are appealing to themselves and each other. And there are videos online that we are all reading about traders, knocking their buckets and clanging their horns, saying, time to reduce prices, reduce prices, reduce prices. Teso, teso, teso. Yeah. I mean, teso has now become a national slogan, for price reductions. Right. And most people have not seen price reductions in a long time for any kind of goods and services. So that's a great time for any economy And at the rate at which the CD-dollar exchange rate is progressing, 10 cedis to $1, I mean, that's something that nobody has ever thought or even could have predicted in January this year. Major achievement.
I see. And speaking about the CD, in the last 690 plus days, as the experts are calling it, the CD has not performed this way.
Correct. World's best performing currency.
Right.
Currently.
Do you feel that this is artificial, or is something we can sustain?
If it was artificial, why didn't that occur last year under the MPP? If it's so artificial, any magician should just pull that ratio out of the hat and then have 5 CD to $1 exchange rate. But it takes intelligence, it takes capacity, it takes experience to know how to juggle or massage the economic activity so that, first of all, I believe that a lot of the performance of the economy has come from slowed down spending.
Yeah.
So the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Finance Minister, has not been overspending and overborrowing as was being done under the previous regime. So that alone, not having 60 ministers to use up all kinds of fuel, to use up houseboys and housegirls and personal assistants and all that, either in the Flagstaff House or in the various ministries, immediately cuts down public expenditure. And of course, if you choose to be very, prudent in the expenditure of your government in terms of procurement, look at the number of procurement breaches. Yeah. Look at ECG procurements of electrical cables that were not going anywhere and have just caused financial loss to the country and to the company, and there was no also service provision using those cables to electrify homes. So it's a triple whammy in that one instance. If you talk about a company like Gihok, where the chief executive was reportedly going away with 40,000 cedis every single month, every single week, for no obvious reason. And of course, the company was also declaring 20 million CD losses per year. You go to the Bank of Ghana itself, which declared a complete loss, I think 50 billion last year. Can you imagine 50 billion loss? And if you look at the gold industry, where our gold revenues were leaking all over the place, and now within less than a quarter of the year, less than half the year, we are talking about more than 500 million, I think it's 500 million that I saw of gold exports. I think it's in billions actually. I don't want to misquote the figure, but it's 5.something billion in gold exports in just 4 or 5 months. So it means that a lot of the wealth of the country was just leaking, being stolen. And just the stopping of the stealing alone, the president of Ghana declared the whole of Ghana, especially the government circles, as a crime scene. Right. That is former Flagstaff House or Jubilee House under the former administration. Crime scene. And a former Attorney General of Ghana also declared a former president as the mother serpent of corruption.
So you feel corruption was the reason why the country was leading at the time?
You've heard of ministers who have millions of dollars under their umbrellas
but some
and their
leading
bags.
figures of the opposition think otherwise, including their previous leader in
think
the
otherwise, or the facts are different?
I'm talking about
Dr.
Mahmoud Bawumia.
What are the facts? What are the facts?
Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia says no policy is backing the kind of economic rebound we are seeing.
Those are theories. You see, if you tell the market woman, you don't see a policy, you don't see a policy. If the policy is let's reduce inflation, is that not a policy? You think a policy has to be written in a book? In his knowledge, that's policy. The word policy, one sentence can be a policy. One sentence.
Really?
Yeah. The government of Ghana is against, abuse of office. It's a policy. But how many words or paragraphs or books or pages does a policy have to have? In his knowledge, academic knowledge.
So he's just doing theory?
It's theory, because a policy doesn't have to be 20 pages. There's nothing anywhere in the world. And you can Google it. That's the policy must be 20 pages, 50 pages, 10 paragraphs. No. A policy is a statement of fact that this government will not tolerate abuse of office. And the ethics of this government, we saw in the asset declaration situation, where the president came down very hard on his own appointees for not declaring the assets on time or at all, and giving them 24 hours to declare the assets or lose their jobs, and then give them, 4-month salary reductions. Is that no more than a book, a policy of many pages, which means nothing? So under MPP, there were many policies. Dr. Bawumia was the architect of hundreds of policies which went nowhere, because the stealing and the debauchery of the economy was the
He says he brought about innovation, digital transformation, and of course, very recently, go for oil policy, which he says...
transformation started. You know, I was the first chairman of the National Communication Authority. And Mr. Bahama, the president, was also the next chairman of the National Communication Authority. It was during our time that all these digital transformational issues started. Digital transformation began 30, 20 years ago. But yeah, government is successive. So all governments take some credit for what predecessor governments have done and then try to do their own. But I'm saying that if the MPP policies were so good, why did the electorate reject them so dramatically, bringing them down below 90 seats in Parliament at the last election?
And I mean, speaking about that victory, did you anticipate that for the NDC, which we then had suffered a major electoral loss in 2016? The comeback was really big for the NDC.
It was very big, and it was commensurate to the unfortunate things that were going on in terms of the mother serpent of corruption issues and the, complete stealing mindset of most of the departed government officials. So as to the number of seats that NDC won, opinions will vary and projections will vary. So yes, most of us were impressed with our own performance or impressed with our own extraordinary performance.
Right.
As to whether you are going to lose 100 seats or 50 seats, again, there'll be those kinds of debates. But generally speaking, after we have also read what they themselves have said about themselves, MPP, through the Ukwe report and all the shenanigans that were going on, how monies that were supposed to be used for campaigning were being used for women and other, personal activities. It helps to tell what they didn't do on their side and what we would have done on our side. Because
so it was more of a loss for the NPP?
It was a loss for them, but also also part of stringent things that we did. You remember that we also had the Kwesi report, from which we also learned our lessons. So we also had learned our lessons over the years. And of course, in terms of campaign strategy and focus on the ballot boxes and the day of elections, election day maneuvering, making sure that you get your votes in. Elderly people in wheelchairs all go to vote, and making sure that after the voting, you sit behind and make sure that the counting is done correctly, and the numbers are also sent to the various centers on time, not to wait for electoral commissioner or whoever else to get their figures. But when the electoral commissioner saw that we had discovered all kinds of fake ballot papers in Ashanti region, 500,000 fake ballot papers, and which have been printed and stored in different places, they realized that we're alert and they couldn't come and stuff ballot boxes and misbehave as they may have done in previous elections. So that's how, so much for politics in Ghana, elections in Ghana.
The feeling is that the NDC has now set a higher standard for itself.
Of course.
And therefore, the whole nation. Ghanaians will be expecting much more from you now. What's your own impression about the NDC to John Mahama to come back this time around?
No, the NDC has always had very high standards. The high standards were set in the times of President Jerry Rawlings, who was a very modest person by himself and by his expenditures. It wasn't possible to do many of the things that we saw under President Akufo-Addo under Rawlings #1. Very difficult. Right. I mean, President Mahama and I were both in the NDC administration under Rawlings, and there was no stealing and no misbehavior of the nature that we saw, because he came with a message that, look, a lot of people have to die for us to be there as ministers. That is a message President Rawlings reminded us repeatedly in meetings, senior party officials, cabinet meetings. It was also a time for sacrifice. Many of us came to work in government with a sacrificial mindset. We left very high-paying jobs, including here at the Development Bank and World Bank, to go to serve our mother country. So stealing and looting was not on our mind. But it is these people who have never believed in Kwame Nkrumah, for example, the founder of our republic. They even question his role, and somebody even had the audacity to say, "Sam or Kwame Nkrumah no," for example, while trying to be a vice president of Ghana. You see, that mindset, it's what destroyed the MPP, because they don't even have the respect that they should have for our leaders, and including those who have sacrificed for us all, Kwame Nkrumah, for all that he did, as far as I know, and most people know, did not leave his family a house. He did not build houses for himself. He had all the State Lands Act, which gives him the powers, that has given MPP powers to give lands to themselves. It's Kwame Nkrumah's time when it was created. Act 1, 1962. And Act 125. If he had wanted to use that act to enrich himself and his family,
he would have acquired
it. All the lands in Ghana were literally at his disposal. But he used that law to acquire land for state construction projects. State House, Job 600, Accra, Tamamoto Way, secondary schools, hospitals. That was what that law was intended for. But people have abused it because it's there. And if Kufuor can give, Obecha Bilamte a certain plot of land right in front of the Mormon church in Ghana, Latter-day Saints, then it's like a free-for-all. If another president comes, after President Hufrado, and his ministers see him giving certain contracts to his family and friends, then it's like, okay, then we all can do it. So that creates a certain negative momentum, and that it allows the economy to go downhill. But if you have a president like Mahama who comes in and starts to set the high standard, both for himself, some people donated a vehicle to him, he donated it back to the state, and he tells the appointees, you have the time to file, if you don't file, so and so. He's imposing discipline.
In fact, civil society says this is the time for the country to pass, or change our asset declaration regime. That way,
of course, there are many better things that can be done.
Through the amendments, making more open.
All kinds of improvements, constitutional improvements of all kinds, amendments to the asset declaration law, publishing the asset declaration. Many things can be improved at all times. So I'm in favor of improvements.
You were minister, one-time minister for trade and industry.
That's correct.
And of course, if Ghana is to develop, trade will be at the core of our comeback. Do you see us on target as a nation towards achieving that? And if not, how do we improve?
The president himself has nominated himself as the chairperson of an accelerated export development program. That's an incredible thing for a president to do. No president has done that, to my knowledge, and has brought in a team, a committee, including Mr. Guzitano, who is also the advisor in his office for the 24-hour economy, to help to drive up exports. But we've seen the exports already from the gold exports. And cocoa, which was allowed, a second export, and which was allowed by MPP to go waste. And if you read what Dr. Randiabe is telling us about cocoa receipts and lack of receipts and contracts and all kinds of spoilage that took place there, while the MPP were prosecuting the CEO, Dr. Opuni, to divert people's attention from the stealing that they did themselves. Now that some investigations are going on about road contracts, a certain former chairman of the party, NPP party, is alleged to have benefited from these contracts. And in fact, Mr. Baumwa himself was known that a lot of the road contract given to his family members were sole sourced. And in fact, almost 85 to 90% of road contracts under MPP were all sole sourced. And if you sole source something, the price goes up because there's no competition, no benchmarks. So that happened thoroughly throughout the MPP administration. There wasn't even a procurement boss who registered so many companies after he was made the National Procurement Director General and used those companies to loot the state. Was there not an MPP chairman or CEO of Forestry Commission who, upon his death, had been seen to have over 100 different assets of all kinds? So there was President Mahama simplifies it by saying that Ghana was a crime scene. Simple. The whole government was a crime scene. And the crimes are coming out slowly. And the issue with the Chief Justice and all that, once that issue is dealt with, I'm sure more crimes will be seen.
The accelerated plan, some are asking, should come with a full-blown policy. So
they're working on that. I mean, Mr. Tano and his team, some of whom are here, are all working on the 24-hour economy plan. It's very complicated because it includes more than 20 dimensions.
Because people are really doubtful about, whether or not we can do it. We need more energy. We need to open up the economy.
Nobody's saying that you don't do it on day one. On day one, you have to have a policy. For the policy to take hold, you must educate and communicate and let people understand. You know how long it took for me and a team, that included President Mahama, to convince Ghanaians that something called value-added tax is a good idea. because MPP came and said it's not a good idea. Let's demonstrate. 30 years ago. And so the value of the tax, which was going to generate revenue for all of us,
at the time,
was delayed by at least 4 or 5 years because of demonstrations. Because people pretended they didn't understand it, or maybe they didn't understand it, as they usually don't. Because
you hear the opposition say one policy, different names, and there's lack of cohesion, as they say, about the policy.
Well, we are not into running after policy just for the policy's sake. We are interested in taking decisions that make sense to the pocketbooks of the average Ghanaian. So talking about how many policies have you developed, I mean, it's rubbish. For example, if you decide that Ghana should have, it should be mostly, we shouldn't import sugar. That statement, Ghana should not import sugar that they can grow in itself in Ghana. Would you say that's a policy or it's not a policy? Does that sound to you like a policy or it's not a policy?
It's a policy.
Very good. And I'm saying that's one sentence. I'm saying that's one sentence. And so with that one sentence, you go and establish Commander Sugar Factory. And you commission it. It was under my supervision. And President Mahama came and commissioned it in 2016, several months ahead of the schedule. And when these people come, then they collapse it again. They pretend there's no factory there. That's what they're telling Ghanaians. A factory that was commissioned in my presence, TV studios, your TV station was there, you covered it all. But when these people come, they pretend it doesn't exist. It's a fantasy. No sugar has never been produced there, you see. No sugar has been crushed. But the equipment is there, machines are there, but they'll run it to the ground so that they can sell it cheap if they can. That's what they would have liked to do if NDC had not come back. Then we're going to give you a national cathedral. So you dig a big hole, started last with $58 million, and what is that to show?
It's now being called an expensive pool.
It's a swimming pool.
What should we do?
And crocodiles that are swimming in the pool.
What should we do with
that? Oh, there are many ideas. There are many. If many of them ideas are inside here.
A hospital, maybe.
Well, we are here. We hear that the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat, which also I had the privilege and honor of helping to put up the building. When I became minister,
the trade,
Africa Export
Trade House,
Export Trade House, that I think they have applied for land to have their headquarters, and of course it's up to the president and the cabinet to decide. But there are many national projects that can readily take up the space at the big hole, as we call it. It's a tourist site, and I think the Ministry of Tourism can easily start charging $5 to foreign tourists just to come and see the biggest embarrassment in African.
Still on the issue of exports, Gold Board is an innovation of the NDC.
Yes, sir.
But the fear also, I was speaking to the Chamber of Mines a couple of days ago, the fear is that we tend to be adopting a nationalized policy in the extractive sector, and that may not send a good signal to the investor community.
Cocoa Board has been around for a long time. It's the sole exporter of cocoa. But they've licensed a lot of buyers to buy the cocoa and bring it to the Cocoa Board, and then they export it, because it is a matter of maximizing the potential for an export commodity which has its own internal rules, quality standards. If you don't have a procedure where you streamline the cocoa export and you get 30, 40 different people coming with different qualities of cocoa, you won't export it, because the Europeans will ban it, Americans will ban it, and that's the end of it. So standards are required. Similarly, in the gold industry, I'm not an expert in it, even though as on the board of Ashanti Goldfields. But there are some standards that would have to be met, and also some regulatory requirements that in the international gold industry are needed to ensure that the quality of the gold that is coming out, and also all the concerns from NGOs about how cocoa is, whether there's child labor in cocoa, for example, same way whether there's child labor in galamsey and in gold mining, all have to be streamlined so that Ghana gets a good name, not just the good product of gold, but then the process also. You can't have everybody keeping gold in their pockets. There are some countries that you go, you can't get anywhere near a gold mine. It's not like where in Ghana almost every 3 million Ghanaians are involved in one aspect of the gold trade and so forth. So it's a streamlining process. We have to get hold of a gold industry. I was embarrassed when I went to the former Vice President of Ghana, Pak Kwesi Misarta, to India when I was Minister of Trade. And at the conference, Ghana spoke before as the guest of honor. Vice President spoke, and he said, Ghana in that year had exported something like $3 billion worth of gold to India. And when the Indians came on stage, they also had a different speech, and they said, well, we imported about $6 billion worth of gold from Ghana.
So which means illicit activities are happening.
100% difference. Yeah, but because people come and sit on TV and tell people that, have you seen gold? Have you seen gold bars before? I'm the one who has the gold bars. You see it on national television. So how people got those gold bars in their own name and took advantage of it to the detriment of the economy of Ghana is a story that has yet to be told. So I know
we're doing a lot more in terms of exports, but sustainability in terms of the environment, as you're pointing to,
yes.
To meet the European standards and others will be of key concern. Illegal mining continues to be a challenge.
Absolutely.
Don't you feel that this new drive, the push we're seeing, we're excelling with the gold exports, must also come along with responsibility in the mining sector?
Absolutely.
Illegal mining remains a challenge.
The Minister for Lands and Forestry and the President are all very, very concerned about both the illegal mining aspect and finding other livelihoods for those who are involved in the illegal mining, because you can't just let them be unemployed and not have other alternatives. So this idea of even the water guards and all that, these are all measures that the government is putting in place
but the menace is never ending.
It takes time to convert people who have dug under their own homes in Ashanti, Konongo and other places, and the homes are collapsing on their families. That's how, unfortunately, how people take risks just in order to get wealth improperly or illegally. You dig under your own house or houses in your neighborhood, put trenches under it, and to look for gold, and those houses collapse on you and your family, and there are funerals going on, and then they start calling on the government to come and help them. So it's a big challenge, and I'm not in a position to give you all the solutions. But I'm saying the government of Ghana and President Mahama is coming out with many solutions. And if you listen to the ministers and their interviews, it's a very transparent government. You have many documents, many interviews being conducted on various radio and TV stations. You have government officials giving news conferences, press conference. Mr. Jinapo, Lands Commission, Mr. Ama Kofi-Boa, are continually engaging the public and being transparent about what is happening. So my experience, I hope, of course, is that if there are as many as 3 million people in the gold trade at different levels, there are some who are doing illegal exporting who are going to be squeezed out through the gold board exercise. They will move on to other things. But I think the jewelry production aspect, which is where PMMC, where came from, is the area that must be expanded. If you want to give jobs to people who are already in the gold industry, then let's try and find jewelry making jobs so they can transit and still be in the industry of gold making, gold polishing, gold assaying, whatever it is, so that, and of course, they have advertised those positions openly in the newspapers, in the gold board. Anybody who wants to apply for more than 20 different categories of positions can do so.
Take it up. And speaking about the president, he was talking a couple of hours ago, explaining how Africa is being, shortchanged in terms of our attempt to reach other markets.
Sure.
Gold will obviously have its market, but the cocoa sector will have challenges when we want to enter the EU market and all of that. What's your own outlook of what's happening around the world now in terms of world trade? We've had some pronouncements by foreign governments. The super economy, US, is leading what some experts say is the breakdown of the rule-based order.
That's true.
Do you feel that these are going to be very challenging times for African economies such as Ghana?
Well, they are challenging times for the whole global economy, but I think it goes down to the personality of President Trump and those who have studied him and who believe that he just likes to make deals which sometimes benefit his country, sometimes his family and what have you. But at the end of the day, most of the things he has been talking about are not sustainable. You see him changing even the rules. Europeans, 50% today. Next time he says 35%. I mean, the whole atmosphere is so confusing for most people that if you talk to the World Trade Organization Secretary General, our friend, a Nigerian friend, Gozi, she would tell you that it's a good idea to just relax and monitor what happens, rather than respond to every little, sneeze or whisper from the White House.
Probably it's because we are all scared. We're not too sure
what will happen. It's not about being scared. It's about being calculating in your response mechanism. You don't respond to somebody who is frenetic and whose decisions are so unpredictable. That's Mr. Trump.
Yeah.
So, but it's about world trade and the global trading rules that have governed our system for the last 60 years, which have been unraveled.
Right.
But the trade cannot take place unless there are rules of one kind or the other between importers and exporters, between member states and nation states. Because even when Trump is trying to get a tariff, he needs the Chinese to agree, or the Ukrainians to agree, or Canada to agree. It has to be an agreement. You can't just impose it unilaterally and let it work. Otherwise, people just withdraw from your market. And there are countries, and the Europeans in particular, are just withdrawing from certain aspects of the American market or imposing other kinds of penalties, non-tariff barriers. So there are tariff and there are non-tariff barriers. So non-tariff barriers are not price-related barriers, but there are also ways of controlling. The Japanese, for example, can open their market to you. And you can export all the rice you want, for example, but they can choose culturally that they don't like rice that is not sticky. They like sticky rice. So all the rice that comes to them sits on the shores of Yokohama and they gather dust. But the Japanese have decided that they will not eat rice of a certain kind. And that is the same thing Ghanaians need to have. When I was Minister of Trade and Industry, I created a Made in Ghana committee, which came out with a logo, which we are hoping that all companies in Ghana will adopt that logo. And when Ghanaians go to shop, they would look for, is this thing made in Ghana? Then I'll buy it. Is this made in Ghana? I'll buy it. This one made in somewhere else? I'm not buying it. It's a conscious decision. And the Canadians did that to Americans. When the Americans imposed tariffs on them, Canadians decided, I will not buy made American products. And America immediately started feeling it. And that's what brought some of the reversals that you saw the White House adopting, because the new Canadian Prime Minister was also a former Bank of England governor, former Bank of Canada governor, very astute person. He did some financial gymnastics, which the White House understood. It was costing them more. In the American debt. America is one of the world's largest debtor nations. They owe more money than anybody else. So if you hit them where their pocketbook hurts, in terms of the bonds that Americans have also floated to attract money to the United States, and the interests are affected, suddenly you find that they are reacting differently. So there are many actions that most countries can take. In the case of Africa, we need to take collective action. And that's where the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat could be a rallying point for us, so that people don't, Swaziland doesn't have to take on its own action, and then Tanzania does something different, and Liberia,
in fact, fortunately,
in response to it, if we take collective action, whatever way we take that action, it will then have weight.
Fortunately, Ghana is hosting that framework, but it's off to a slow start. Just about 8 countries, now 20 doing the guided trade initiative.
But there are 3,000 or so products that have actually qualified, I believe.
Why are more countries not just joining for us to kickstart, knowing that indeed we are facing some challenges?
People are used to their trading habits for 50 years. So a certain company is also used to importing from Korea spare parts. Another company is used to importing rice or tomatoes from so and so. They change old habits. Old habits die hard. And then you have to replace whatever the current trajectory of import-export relationships with new ones, which hopefully are either more affordable or better quality, or some are preferable. And that takes a lot of work in all ministries or governments. And you can also not have a coherent policy in your own country when the country that is taking those negative actions also changes its mind regularly. Because you don't know, today Trump says this, tomorrow he says that. So you can't also predict or forecast his behavior. That's why, as I said, Ngozi Obiela, World Trade Organization, says, please just be calm. Let's monitor what happens for some time before we start taking action, because chances are that you may take the wrong actions if you react too quickly.
2 more issues before we go. The NDC is considering a women's development bank. Obviously, women
that's already proposed it, yes.
Women form...
And they've put seed money into it, yes.
Women form the majority of our informal sector. In fact, they are the backbone of our economy.
Correct.
Some say, well, it's a discriminatory policy, but it favors empowerment of women.
Correct.
How soon should the bank take off? And do you feel that capital will indeed be available when it's done?
The finance minister already voted, I think, 51 million or something initially, just to begin studies and consultancy work and exploratory activities. But my sense is that there will be some consolidation. There may be some other one of the existing banks which may be used as a mother institution to, produce the women's bank. But that's all within the finance ministry's domain. So I don't want to misspeak, as it were. But it will be established for sure.
What's about the NDC and women? First female vice president, Women Development Bank.
Excellent.
Is there a subtle agenda?
No,
going on?
nothing. Right. If you go to a market to what kind of gender do you see there? When we say markets, it's not mostly market men, it's market women.
Right.
So women are the biggest traders in all our marketplaces in Ghana. Men may do some of the farming, but invariably some women do a lot of the farming also. So I grow cassava and I grow a number of crops, so I know a lot about the farming activities. And women need empowerment. I think that has been agreed since the Beijing conference 30 years ago, but it's not easy to even fulfill all the ambitions of any government with regards to gender. So even the NDC has admitted that it is not doing as well. In fact, the area that we are poorly judged in this 120 agenda was how many women are in the cabinet, how many women are MPs, and all those things. So NDC has a lot to do to improve the lot of women. But having a woman vice president is actually a very good initial step. And then having a women's bank and any other women, so 24-hour economy, we expect that should benefit as many women as possible. So you don't only depend on the women's bank. Other banks that have loans for both men and women can prioritize women depending on the kinds of products or services that are needed. And they should also have women's desks in the bank itself. A bank that is not a women's bank, Fidelity Bank or Access Bank or any other Ekow Bank can have a women's desk in the bank to help women to develop business plans or whatever it takes to forward their business.
The belief is that, the empowerment of a woman such as Torkornoo as Chief Justice would have complemented this whole push to support more women and to make women, lead in terms of, some key aspects.
Well, I think you are aware that we've had many women judges over the last 50, 60 years since independence. We've had Justice Annie Jaggi, who was a very famous person in a time. And more recently, you've had at least 2 or 3 women so far. Akufo was one.
Yes.
And there was also Theodora Wood. And there was another one who became the Speaker of Parliament. Earlier on.
Bamfordado.
Very good. So we've had all these women judges playing various prominent roles. If it comes to the Commission of Human Rights and Administrative Justice, I believe the current chairperson of this civic education is a woman.
NCC, yes.
Yeah, it's a woman. And we've had other women like Loretta Lamptey being Straj boss in the past. I think Ghana generally, it's up to the women. But I think they will say that we give them a fair chance. But they must also admit that they themselves often decide that they don't want to go for public positions because of the harshness of the rhetoric sometimes and some abuses that they may suffer. But the opportunity is there. We go to the same secondary schools with them. They do as well or better than us sometimes in some courses. So we know how good they are. And we respect them as our partners. We are married to them. Or they are our mothers in some cases or sisters. So there's no way we will disrespect
in the case
women.
of the CJ, are we being fair to her?
Based on the laws that she herself helped to pass. And she herself helped to sit on as a Chief Justice. We are implementing the law. She said the law is the law. And so the law is the law, and the law is being applied to her. And the incidents that are being cited, unless she proves that they are not correct, that they are false.
She says she's been taken through mental torture already through the process. So she feels
it depends on how every individual responds to adversity. We all go through adversity. We have family members who die, we have people who have accidents, and it depends on how we handle it. So I won't comment on what kind of adversity she claims she's feeling. All that I heard was that the location that she thought a certain hearing would be conducted was not what the government chose to have the hearing in. But it's the government who chooses where to have the hearing. And if you say that the hearing itself was not fair in terms of the procedures or they didn't follow the rule of law, I may have more sympathy with that. But all I've heard is about, you took me to a place which I didn't think.
She's calling for a and those who believe in it are calling for a televised
the law that
process.
She herself has been sworn, she says, it shall not be televised. There should be in camera. That's what I've again seen lawyers quoting. You yourself are Chief Justice, and your own laws say that this particular process should be confidential, hopefully to protect her own interest, because we don't know all the kinds of things that may come out. And so, out of respect to her family and her future and her own legacy, it may be in her interest to allow the law to work without trying to change anything at this stage.
As an elderly person, would you advise her to resign? I mean, would that be in her own interest?
It's not up to me, because a resignation is an individual thing a person will decide based on the overall information available to them at any particular time. But the good news, as far as I know, about the Chief Justice and other public prominent positions, is that you retire entirely on your salary.
Right.
But I don't know if you don't resign and you get sacked, whether it is something different. But otherwise, the Chief Justice retires on a salary. So someone will ask, if you are going to retire on your salary, then why worry so much about
staying on?
About staying on? When your actual, well, of course, when you retire on your salary, unless you want to stay there because of this opportunity to have your husband and children travel, etc., which obviously when you're not there, you'll not be able to have. But otherwise, other normal benefits, you have those benefits. So it's an individual judgment, and I won't try to take one for her.
The NDC says that it's an agenda, a long-term agenda of the NDC to oust the EC boss, to oust all those who are in public service who do not necessarily belong to...
Unlike JAPAD, which was a document that MPP people wrote and told us point by point by point what they were going to do to arrest people, to change people, to give people licenses, to take them out of the banking sector, to do this and to do that. They wrote a whole book on it and tried to implement it to the best of their ability. NDC doesn't have any such document that I'm aware of that says NPP will do this and they should remove this person. I'm not aware. I haven't seen those documents.
Right. Okay.
It may be somebody's idea or thoughts.
Right. Let me take your final message to the people of Ghana. And even before that, I don't know if you want to comment on the decision by Ghana to close down embassy in Washington. The belief is that some individual Ghanaians are diverting monies, mail issues. That's quite a serious crime.
Well, all the facts are yet to come out. But the initial facts that have been put out by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, who obviously is Mr. Oral, so he takes a lot of interest in due diligence and giving people a full opportunity, is that there was a crime scene, as President Mahama said, at the Embassy of Ghana, a place I served. At that time, there were no crime scenes there. We just administered things properly. But a rogue officer apparently, reportedly, has confessed to creating a certain company.
By that kind of mentality? Actually?
I'm not shocked, because in Ghana, under the MPP, a lot of such things took place, almost in every government agency. A whole class of human beings were created apart from the actual civil servants. So if you go to DVLA, if you want something, you want to Lands Commission, you want to Survey Department, you go to Register General's Department, go to the User Service, they will refer you to some contractor, a private person, who should take your documents and process it for you to get your documents, rather than the official civil servants doing it. That happened throughout the entire public service. So a whole category of MPP people were created as contractors, consultants, to suck money out of the public purse and to live a certain life beneath the public servants and eventually above them.
But in this case of the U.S. Embassy, won't it create problems for us? Because, U.S. is quite a big country.
Well, it's a sensitive matter, and I'm hoping and praying that the Foreign Ministry, with a lot of experience and the Foreign Ministry are very experienced people. Foreign Ministry, Bank of Ghana, Ministry of Finance, highly experienced people, and I think they will take appropriate decisions and measures.
Local staff in the U.S. are being released or relieved of their posts?
I believe the whole embassy has been closed down.
Right.
Local staff are being, relieved of their positions.
Is that not
the diplomatic staff sent from Ghana are being recalled to Ghana?
Yeah. Some say that's extreme.
Some will stay. I don't know the facts, so I can't tell whether it's extreme or not. I'm saying that you must assume that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is experienced also, with a lot of 50 years of experience, will also have looked at all the facts that you and I don't know, and based on all the facts, this was the decision that they felt was the best. And I take the minister's comment seriously, that he started his statement with in consultation with the president, the following decisions are being taken. That's how he started his statement, which meant that the president was fully aware.
And you've served there before, so do you feel that there should be some immediate changes before the embassy?
It's difficult to suggest that. There's an embassy in New York which can obviously play certain roles in the meantime. There are other embassies around the whole world. People can move up. Diplomats are used to operating at 24 hours notice. When you are told you are persona non grata, that's the diplomatic word, that this country where you are serving does not want to see you anymore for whatever reason. The Russians and Americans do that to themselves regularly.
That's the end of
you take your suitcase and you go out. So most diplomats, you go to a house that has been furnished already with your suitcase.
Right.
So at all times you must be ready to take your suitcase and move.
Right.
That's a diplomat's mindset. So they are not surprised or disturbed by having to move at short notice, both to leave Washington or to come back to Washington or whatever the case might be.
But do we have to take steps to repair our image immediately?
Oh yeah, there'll be a lot of reparation and crisis management and crisis communication, all kinds of things that should happen and I hope will happen.
Right. Any final words to the people of Ghana?
Well, I'm here at the African Development Bank annual meetings, and we are here to celebrate what the African Development Bank has done for the whole African continent over the last 60 years or so. And I was privileged to have been a member of the staff to have actually produced their first audiovisual production.
Wow.
That is a new vision of Africa. To have produced their first newsletter.
That gives
which
you
was
nostalgia,
then
isn't it?
Labad Ojodui, that's
right.
ADB today.
Right.
And so I've also seen the progression of the bank.
Right.
And as I come back and I meet some of the former staff members and some of the newer staff members who happen to include one of my daughter, I'm impressed, especially with what the speech he delivered and the presentation he made about the improvement that he himself has brought, where the bank's portfolio and disbursements and growth has, in some cases, increased by 25 to 40% over the last 10 years since he's been in office. And I think comparing those figures actually tells a lot of the story about what President Adesina has done. And Ghana should be proud because Ghana was the sponsor of this president at the time he was a candidate. And President Mahama also spoke about that fact. And the fact he liked the fact that Adesina came from an agricultural background, and so Ghana supported him fully. I was here for the election that day 10 years ago where he was elected. And so I also share the President's comments as to how successful President Adesina has been to the glory of all of Africa. What he has been doing here is for all of us, our benefits. Roads that are being built in our country, power plants, agricultural projects. Africa is doing well.
And you wish the next candidate well.
The next candidate is a tall order.
Right.
He has to achieve or exceed. Right. And I think whoever is selected in the wisdom of the board of directors and governors will do the right thing with all of our help.
Right. Honorable Spio-Garbrah, thank you so much.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Right.